February 20th, 1943. The desolate, rock-strewn hills north of Kasserine Pass, Tunisia. Dawn light, the color of a healing bruise, bleeds through a sky choked with cordite and the fine, talc-like dust unique to the North African battlefield. A German tank commander, a veteran of the Blitzkrieg across Poland and France, presses his binoculars so hard against his eyes that the rubber cups leave rings on his skin. He is not seeing what his doctrinal mind tells him is possible. Through the shifting gray-brown curtain of war, 5 American M4 Sherman tanks, separated by broken wadis, jagged ridgelines, and at least half a kilometer of terrain that should offer no line of sight, are moving with a synchronized purpose that defies all logic. No signal flags flutter from open hatches. No flare guns arc crimson into the morning sky. No dispatch riders on screaming motorcycles race between the hulls, dodging machine gun fire. And yet, the 5 tanks pivot, halt, and advance as if operated by a single, hive-minded intelligence. When one tank's turret swings to cover a blind defile, another instantly adjusts its axis of advance to compensate. When a German anti-tank gun barks from a concealed position, all 5 American cannons answer in a staggered, overlapping volley, suppressing the threat with hellish precision. The German officer, inside his Panzer IV, screams into his throat microphone over the deafening roar of the Maybach engine. He is using a state-of-the-art FuG 5 radio. The airwaves are a maelstrom of ignition static, generator whine, and the screeching interference of 1,000 metal tracks grinding against stone. He cannot hear his company commander. He cannot coordinate. He can only watch. The American maneuver, which looked like supernatural precognition, had a very earthly and very revolutionary explanation. The year was 1943, and the German Wehrmacht had just collided with the most decisive technological advantage of the Second World War, a weapon that was invisible, silent, and 18 months ahead of anything they could conceive. It wasn't mounted in the turret. It was bolted into the hull. This is the declassified case file on the SCR-508 radio, the 181-pound crystal-controlled frequency modulation network that transformed 49-304 Shermans from adequate fighting vehicles into the world's first truly networked army, and in doing so, changed the nature of warfare forever. The brutal arithmetic of armored warfare is usually calculated in millimeters of rolled homogeneous steel and meters per second of muzzle velocity. The Tiger's 88mm gun versus the Sherman's 75mm. The Panther's sloped frontal glacis versus the Sherman's thin, upright hull. But the final, unredacted truth of the conflict is that victory in the electromagnetic spectrum rendered those physical equations almost irrelevant. While German industry was feverishly casting thicker turrets and forging longer barrels, a quiet consortium of American engineers at a company then called the Galvin Manufacturing Corporation, soon to be known to the world as Motorola, was solving a problem the German high command didn't know it had. The architect of this invisible victory was a dual-threat team. Daniel E. Noble, who conceived the battlefield application of FM technology, and Henrik Magnuski, a principal RF engineer who would solve the terrifying physics of keeping a sensitive radio operational inside a screaming, shaking 50°C metal box. Their creation was a black steel case containing 2,748 individual components. Inside, 474 capacitors and 385 resistors were woven into a circuit that generated a transmission power of 25 watts. To put that in a perspective that terrified German signals intelligence, it was 2.5 times the output of their own standard FuG-5 transceiver. But power was merely the beginning of the nightmare for the Wehrmacht. The real revolution lived in the waveform itself. The German military had standardized on amplitude modulation, or AM, a technology pioneered in the 1920s. AM encodes sound by varying the power, or amplitude, of a radio wave. The problem is that the battlefield is a hellscape of electrical noise. Every spark plug firing in a Panzer FuG's engine, every dynamo spinning, every electrical relay clicking, and every shell burst sending out a micropulse of energy was received by an AM radio, not as background noise, but as a piercing, deafening shriek of static that blotted out human voices. The American SCR-508, however, operated on an entirely different physical principle: frequency modulation, the masterwork of the brilliant and tragic inventor Edwin Howard Armstrong, licensed to the military for the duration of the war. FM encodes sound not by changing the height of the wave, but by minutely shifting the wave's frequency, the number of times it oscillates per second. Since lightning, static, and engine noise manifest as amplitude variations, an FM receiver, by design, ignores them. It simply looks for the frequency shift. The result was a clarity that German tank commanders, who had grown accustomed to a combat environment of near-total sonic chaos, described in captured diaries as nothing short of unheimlich, uncanny. Through the SCR-508, a commander's voice cut through the cacophony of a 450 horsepower radial engine and the concussive shock waves of artillery, barrages as if he were standing in a quiet room, whispering. This clarity was fortified by a second, equally critical innovation: crystal control. German FuG 5 radios tuned their frequencies using variable capacitors, delicate mechanical systems that were highly susceptible to the violent vibration of cross-country travel. A tank hitting a shell crater at combat speed could send its receiver drifting off frequency, forcing a frantic, fine motor tuning operation in the middle of a firefight. In the American system, a tiny, precisely ground quartz crystal oscillated at a fixed frequency. When an electrical current was applied, the crystal vibrated like a microscopic tuning fork, locking the transmitter and receiver onto a specific channel with a stability of plus or minus 0.01%. On the SCR-508's control panel, there were 10 preset channels. A commander didn't have to find his company net in the ether. He simply clicked a detent on a rotary switch. He was there, instantly, with rock-solid stability. This innovation turned every Sherman tank into a reliable node in a prearranged, jam-resistant communications architecture. The contrast with the German experience was a chasm. The FuG 5's 10-watt signal, when it could be tuned, might reach 3 kilometers on a perfect day with the vehicle stationary. When moving, enveloped in its own electromagnetic noise cloud, that range collapsed to a few hundred meters, barely beyond visual line of sight. And for most German tank crews, even this limited capability was a fantasy they would never experience. A standard 1943 German Panzer platoon comprised 5 vehicles, in a crippling operational paradox that stemmed from industrial limitations and a rigid command philosophy. Only 1 or 2 of those tanks were ever equipped with a full FuG 5 transceiver, capable of both transmitting and receiving. The remaining 3 tanks carried only the FuG 2 receiver. They were, in effect, mute and deaf-mute. They could receive a torrent of frantic orders, but they could not report a single enemy position. They could not warn a comrade that an enemy tank destroyer was tracking them from a defilade. They could not call for artillery. They could only listen and obey or die. The Wehrmacht compensated for this crippling silence with hierarchy. The platoon leader, identifiable by a conspicuous, multi-antenna forest sprouting from his turret, was the sole voice of God. His orders were absolute, and subordinate tanks acknowledged through the execution of maneuvers, not through words. This system, born of technological poverty, created a single catastrophic point of failure. American tankers, trained to identify the antenna farms of command tanks, knew that one precisely aimed armor piercing shell could decapitate an entire German platoon. The moment that specific tank brewed up, the remaining 4 Panzers, powerful, heavily armored, and now utterly uncoordinated, reverted to a state of tactical paralysis, easy prey for a pack of Shermans that could shift, call targets, and swarm with the fluidity of a single organism. In the American armored force, there were no peasant tanks. The M4 Sherman was born with a platinum spoon in its mouth. Every single vehicle that rolled out of the Detroit tank arsenal carried a complete SCR-508, SCR-528, or SCR-538 set. Every tank was a command tank. When the platoon leader was killed, the next in command didn't have to wave a flag. He simply keyed his throat microphone, and his voice seamlessly took over the tactical net. The network was self-healing. This network was first tested under the harsh sun of North Africa. During Operation Torch in November 1942, the 2nd Armored Division landed near Safi and Fadala with SCR-508 radios that were about to render every German assumption about armored combat obsolete. The Afrika Korps, the Desert Foxes under Erwin Rommel, were the Wehrmacht's most experienced and tactically sophisticated armored force. Yet they operated under communication constraints that would have been considered a national emergency in the U.S. Army. This technological asymmetry would reach its violent and revelatory crescendo 3 months later in the chaotic, embittered fighting of Kasserine Pass. From February 14th to the 24th, 1943, the Green Troops of the U.S. 1st Armored Division received a brutal tactical drubbing from the battle-hardened Panzer divisions. But in the confused swirl of combat, where units were scattered across 50 miles of broken desert, something emerged that profoundly rattled the German intelligence apparatus. The Americans, even in retreat, maintained a level of inter-unit coordination that defied explanation. Scattered Shermans from different battalions, crewed by men who had never trained together, spontaneously formed hunter-killer teams. They warned each other of Rommel's infamous Dwauetemiflak, guns being used in an anti-tank role. They coordinated interlocking fields of fire, captured German signal logs from the 10th Panzer. Division's intelligence section revealed a chilling discovery. Analysts reported that they were intercepting exceptionally clear, panic-free voice traffic from American tankers. The range and clarity were impossible. More disturbing was the conclusion that every American tank was a transmitting station. The Germans, assuming their own command-centric model, could not isolate a single command vehicle to target. The enemy was a hydra. If the desert proved the range of the system, the mountains of Italy, invaded in September 1943, proved its agility. The Italian campaign was a slogging match through terrain that should have nullified any radio advantage. Steep Apennine ridges, deep valleys, and river gorges created the kind of multipath interference that was an AM radio's final boss. Radio waves bounce off rock faces, arriving at a receiver microseconds apart, turning a voice into a garbled, phase-distorted mess. The physical nature of FM technology allowed it to shrug off this multipath chaos with a phenomenon known as the capture effect. The receiver locks onto the strongest signal path and rejects the weaker echoes. As the Allies fought inch by bloody inch toward Monte Cassino, American tanks, separated by entire ridge lines, executed complex pincer movements with a precision that German doctrine, still reliant on visual signals and messengers, said required direct line of sight. The first after-action reports from the 1st Armored Division began to codify what was happening. Routine, sustained, clear communication at distances where German radios produced nothing but a wall of white noise. June 6, 1944. The liberation of Europe begins. As the ramp doors dropped at Omaha and Utah, the SCR-508 sets in the waiting. Shermans of the 741st Tank Battalion were already maintaining seamless contact with the Navy destroyers, standing offshore, guiding naval gunfire, with a degree of accuracy that was a dark miracle of coordination. But the breakout from Normandy's beaches slammed headfirst into a landscape that exposed the one critical vulnerability in the American network: the bocage. These ancient hedgerows, sunken roads, and small, irregular fields turned the war into a close-quarters knife fight. Here, a new and deadly communication gap appeared. The Shermans SCR-508 operated in the 20.0 to 27.9 MHz band, the infantry's SCR-300 backpack radio, the famous walkie-talkie. That was the other FM revolution, operated on 40.0 to 48.0 MHz. The two critical components of the combined arms team were speaking different languages on different frequencies. A GI crouching behind a hedgerow, watching a German Lancers with a Panzerfaust stalk the blind spot of a Sherman, idling 20 meters away, had no way to scream a warning into the tank crew's ears. The tactical solution, born of the desperate, lethal ingenuity of the battlefield, was brutally simple and effective. Tank crews mounted an EE-8 field telephone, normally a wired telephone for artillery posts, inside a spent ammunition box. They welded this box to the rear of the Sherman's hull. The handset was wired directly into the tank's internal BC-606 intercom system. An infantryman could now run up to the back of the tank, rip the handset out of the box, and speak directly to the commander. The network had extended from machine to machine, and now, with a jury-rigged cord, from man to machine. By Operation Cobra, the St. Lo breakout in late July 1944, this human element patch had been integrated, and the full, terrifying potential of a fully networked armored division was unleashed on a scale never before seen in human history. The 2nd Armored Division, Hell on Wheels, commanded by Major General Edward H. Brooks, coordinated over 200 Shermans, tank destroyers, and self-propelled artillery pieces through a nested, hierarchical FM radio network. Brooks could monitor the forward combat net of his lead battalions, issue a maneuver order to a reserve company, and receive a situation report from a reconnaissance element, all within the space of a few heartbeats. The German defenders of the Panzer Lehr Division, an elite formation, faced an enemy that seemed to possess a shared, instantaneous consciousness. A German assault gun concealed in a copse of trees would be spotted by a lowly Sherman on point. Within seconds, that grid coordinate was relayed across the net. Within 3 minutes, not the 30-minute, lag time of the German artillery system, ATO, time on target, TOT, barrage from an entire battalion of M7. Priests was vaporizing the position. The Sherman's radio wasn't just coordinating tanks, it was serving as a forward observation post, an air-ground liaison node, and a command and control hub all in one. Panzer Lehr, once the Wehrmacht's premier armored division, had been bled white. Its remaining Panther and Panzer IV tanks were fighting as isolated, blind individuals in a landscape, where the Americans were fighting as a coordinated, seeing organism. The tragic irony of this, German communication poverty, is that they had been the pioneers. In the 1920s and 1930s, General Heinz Guderian, the father of the Blitzkrieg, had written the book on this. His 1937 work, Achtung, Panzer, was a doctrinal Bible that stressed, above all else, the absolute necessity of radio control for rapid armored operations. Guderian envisioned a fluid battlefield where commanders led from the front, issuing rapid-fire orders via radio to exploit fleeting breakthroughs. Yet by 1943, the industrial capacity of the Third Reich had utterly failed Guderian's vision. The data is a damning epitaph to German industrial planning. In 1943, Germany produced approximately 5,700 medium and heavy tanks. In that same year, they manufactured fewer than 2,000 FuG-5 transceivers. The math is brutal. Most of those precious transceivers were diverted to Tiger battalions, command variants, and assault guns. The vast bulk of the Panzer force went into battle deaf and mute. On the other side of the Atlantic, the Motorola plant in Chicago, which had been making car radios for Buicks, underwent a metamorphosis into a high-tech military arsenal. The production trajectory was a vertical line of impossible ambition. 3,800 radio sets in 1942, 11,400 in 1943, 24,000 units in 1944. By the end of the war, total production of the SCR-508 family exceeded 50,000 sets, more than enough to ensure that every one of the 49,324 M4 Shermans manufactured was a fully equipped node in the network. The Soviet Union, fighting the other titanic half of the land war, watched this American miracle with a mixture of envy and disbelief. The vaunted T-34, the war-winning tank of the Red Army, typically rolled into combat without any radio at all. Soviet armored doctrine in 1941 and 1942 was so primitive, so catastrophically reliant on signal flags and pre-battle choreography, that entire tank corps were annihilated when their lead tank was knocked out and the following echelons, unable to be redirected, drove blindly into the killing zone. American Lend-Lease provided a trickle of SCR-508 sets for Soviet command tanks, but by the Battle of Berlin in 1945, fewer than 25% of Red Army tanks could communicate beyond waving a flag. The United States, in a staggering feat of industrial and technological mobilization, had achieved a 100% deployment rate of a communication system 15 years ahead of its time. Let us go inside the machine. The physical heart of this network was the SCR-508, a unit weighing 181 pounds, usually mounted in the turret bustle. The transmission component, the BC-604, was a brute force of clean RF energy, 25 watts of FM signal in the 20.0 to 27.9 MHz range. The receiving module was a dual BC-603 configuration, a piece of tactical genius that allowed the commander to flip a switch and monitor two distinct radio nets simultaneously. He could keep one ear on the company command net, waiting for a battalion order to shift his axis of advance, while the other ear was locked on his platoon's tactical net, listening to the sharp, coded reports of his subordinates. This dual-watch capability created a fluid, three-dimensional command awareness that German officers, hunched over a single screeching AM speaker, could only dream of. The system was integrated with the BC-606 intercom. This wasn't just a luxury, it was a force multiplier. The driver, the gunner, the loader, and the commander all wore throat microphones and noise-canceling headphones inside their tanker helmets. The intercom was voice-activated. When the gunner spotted the dark, menacing silhouette of a tiger emerging from a tree line, he didn't have to scream over the engine and kick the commander's seat. He simply said, "Tiger, 11 o'clock, 400 meters," and his calm voice was piped directly into the ears of the crew, and, if the commander keyed the external radio, to the entire platoon. In the Panzer IV, many tanks lacked a functional intercom entirely. The crew communicated by tapping shoulders, by shouting, or in the terrifying silence before a hit, not communicating at all. The raw tactical consequence of this gap was demonstrated with merciless clarity at the Battle of Arracourt in Lorraine. September 1944, the 4th Armored Division, a battle-hardened but technically outgunned American unit, was confronted by the new German Panzer, brigades equipped with brand-new Panther tanks. The Panther was, on paper, a war-winning weapon. Its long-barreled gun could punch through the frontal armor of a Sherman at distances where the Sherman's 75mm shells would simply bounce off the Panther's thick, sloping glacis. In a one-on-one duel, the Sherman was statistically dead. But the Battle of Arracourt was not a series of duels. It was a network versus a collection of platforms. As the Panthers, shrouded in the morning fog and nearly blind without proper radios, blundered into the American positions in rigid column formations, the 4th Armored Division's radio net lit up with a torrent of sighting reports. Every Sherman commander, every reconnaissance jeep, and every artillery observer became a sensor. The tactical picture painted over the FM airwaves was so precise that American commanders began coordinating the battle like a chess match. A Sherman troop would put a few rounds into a Panther's flank from a hidden position, provoking a reflexive German rotation. As the Panther turned its heavy frontal armor to face the initial threat, it exposed its vulnerable side armor to a second Sherman troop that had been moved into a perfect ambush position through a series of rapid, silent radio commands. Tank destroyer battalions, listening in on the same frequency, maneuvered to seal off escape routes. Over 3 weeks of brutal, swirling combat, the 4th Armored destroyed 281 German armored fighting vehicles. American losses totaled 41 Shermans. That is a kill ratio of nearly 7-to-1, an exchange rate that grossly inverts the technical superiority of the German armor. It was a victory not of steel, but of silicon, crystal, and vacuum tubes. Here lies the final damning failure of the German war machine. They never figured it out. Throughout the entire conflict, German signals, intelligence and tactical analysis experienced a monumental failure of imagination. A captured intelligence summary from September 1944, distributed to Panzer Division commanders, reads with the tragic certainty of a blind man describing an elephant. It states, "American tank units demonstrate good radio discipline and coordination. This appears to result from extensive training and rigid communication procedures. The report is a case study in cognitive bias, in the fatal assumption that the enemy is doing the same thing you are, just slightly better." The Germans could not conceive of frequency modulation. It was not in their industrial vocabulary for tactical radios. They could not conceive that every single American tank was a high-power, crystal-locked transceiver node. And so, German tactical adaptations were tragically misaligned with reality. Panzer crews were still trained to hunt for command tanks, based on antenna configurations, a tactic that was utterly useless against an enemy where every tank was a command tank. Ambush tactics were predicated on the idea that separation would break American coordination, not realizing that the invisible electromagnetic tethers of the SCR-508 held unit cohesion, regardless of terrain or visual obscuration. By March 1945, the speed of the American network had become the central, operational factor of the war. The breathtaking capture of the Ludendorff Bridge at Remagen on March 7th is the perfect testament. When a forward reconnaissance element of the 9th Armored Division saw the bridge still intact, they didn't need to send a rider back or wait for a courier pigeon. The report was broadcast in seconds. 1st Army Headquarters, listening on the command net, understood the strategic opportunity within a minute. Within an hour, orders were being cut on the FM net, redirecting entire divisions from other sectors of the front toward Remagen. The German defenders, whose field telephone wires had been systematically severed by American fighter bombers, directed by air-ground radios, and whose remaining AM radios were drowned in static, could not react with a fraction of that speed. Piecemeal counterattacks, arriving hours late and in uncoordinated packets, were destroyed by a bridgehead defense that was woven together by the invisible threads of the SCR-508 network. The ultimate expression of this networked warfare was the Encirclement of the Ruhr Pocket in April 1945. Here, American armored columns from the 1st and 9th Armies executed a massive double envelopment, a canny on an industrial scale, coordinated almost entirely through radio. The encirclement sealed the fate of 325,000 German troops. Inside the pocket, German communications collapsed into static and silence. Field Marshal Walter Model, a brilliant defensive tactician, found himself commanding a phantom army. His final messages, before the radio waves deserted him, painted a picture of total isolation. No contact with adjacent units. No communication with higher headquarters. Fighting continues, but coordination impossible. Model's plight was not unique. It was the end state of a nation that had gambled on thicker armor and bigger guns while ignoring the silent revolution of the electromagnetic spectrum. Otto Carius, one of the war's most successful German tank aces, would later write in his memoir, Tigers in the Mud, about the profound loneliness of the German tank commander, a psychological isolation where every battle felt like a lone stand, disconnected from the larger fight. The American tanker, by contrast, lived inside a community of voices. When a Sherman was hit, the cry for help was heard by an entire division. The medic, the recovery vehicle, and the suppressing artillery fire were all coordinated by the same network that had seen the threat in the first place. The numbers strip the myth bare. Germany produced approximately 6,000 FuG, 5 transceivers for roughly 12,000, medium and heavy tanks, a 20% deployment of a system that was fatally compromised by its own physics. The United States deployed over 50,000 FM, radio sets for 49th 324 Shermans, 100% deployment of a system that was 15 years ahead of its time. The German AM radio's effective range while moving was a catastrophic, half a mile to 1 mile, a distance often indistinguishable from visual contact. The American FM radio maintained clear, tactical coordination at 7 miles on the move, extending to 15 miles when stationary. The average time for an American artillery fire mission, from target identification to rounds on target, was 3 to 5 minutes. For the Wehrmacht, crippled by a multi-step relay of runners and unreliable radios, it was 15 to 30 minutes, an eternity on a modern battlefield. The American Sherman was never designed to go toe-to-toe with the Tiger in a single combat slugfest. It was designed to fight as a pack. The SCR-508 was the leash, the Alpha's call, and the shared mind of that pack. General Guderian, the architect of the Panzer arm, recognized this chasm too late. In a despairing December 1944 memorandum as Inspector General of Armored Troops, he acknowledged that American coordination, the ability to mass fires and maneuver with blinding speed, was systematically negating the qualitative edge of his own dwindling. Panzer divisions. A U.S. Army Technical Intelligence report after the German surrender concluded with clinical finality. German tank communications equipment was approximately 5 years behind American systems. The Soviet Red Army, given a choice of what to copy from captured German equipment, ignored the FuG-5 entirely and began reverse engineering the American SCR-300 and SCR-508 for their own post-war armored forces. The invisible victory of the SCR-508 established a ruthless principle that has governed armored warfare ever since. The network defeats the platform. Information dominance outweighs platform superiority. In the 1991 Gulf War, coalition M1 Abrams tanks, equipped with digital data links that could trace their operational lineage directly back to the crystal-controlled simplicity of the Sherman, annihilated Iraqi forces equipped with individually formidable Soviet T-72s. The Iraqis, like the Panzer crews at Arracourt, had superior armor on paper, but they were operationally blind, their commanders screaming into unreliable VHF sets while the Americans maneuvered and fired as a unified, data-sharing entity. So we return to that dusty morning north of Kasserine Pass. The German tank commander, his Panzer IV radio hissing with the chaotic static of the universe, watches 5 American tanks move like a single organism. He does not know it, but he is witnessing the death of an old form of war, and the terrifying, invisible birth of the new. The Wehrmacht had built a sledgehammer, powerful and blunt. The Americans had built a nervous system. Field Marshal Wilhelm Keitel, at the moment of Germany's total and unconditional surrender, is reported to have said, "We knew how to build better tanks, but you knew how to make them work together." Whether apocryphal or not, the statement distills a truth sharper than any armor-piercing shell. The Americans did not just build 49,324 Sherman tanks. They built 49,324 nodes in the world's first armored battlefield network. The war was not won by the Sherman's gun, but by the invisible, silent, electromagnetic wave that whispered between them, turning 40,000 individual machines into a single, decisive weapon. The German Panzer crews discovered this reality not through a dossier or an intelligence briefing, but through the terrifying experience of fighting, a swarm that could see through smoke, coordinate through mountains, and speak with one voice, while they themselves fell, isolated and alone, into the eternal static. Was it ever truly a fair fight? Or was the outcome predetermined the moment the first SCR-508, humming at 25 watts of crystal-locked frequency modulation, was bolted into the hull of an American Sherman, rendering physical armor irrelevant in the face of a weapon that could not be seen, could not be intercepted, and could not be stopped? A shared mind.